you are always living in this state of fantasy. I recently came across this super cool study about long distance relationships and why they fail. And what's really interesting about this study is that it gives us insights into how to make a relationship or a long distance relationship work. Now, before we start talking about this, there's one important thing to consider. If you have started your relationship as a long distance relationship, then the rules are slightly different, and how things play out is also slightly different because you've never been together physically other than, stolen weekends and quick trips in a space and environment that's unfamiliar to at least one of you. Because of that, you have this huge hurdle of spending time with each other and first getting comfortable around each other physically. A lot of times, relationships start off in the same city, and because of work, because of studies, one person has to move and it ends up becoming a long distance relationship. So here things are different because you have a foundation of having spent time with each other. So you know each other a little bit more. Whereas in the first case, where you've started a relationship as a long distance relationship, you are always living in this state of fantasy. You don't have a real sense of who they are. So your relationship is going to be a lot about learning that. But when you have already been with this person for a significant amount of time before it becomes a long distance relationship, that brings with it a whole new host of challenges, right? Because you're already attached to this person. You probably have some level of commitment in the relationship. Either way, this study applies. It's just that in the first case, it comes into play a little bit later, whereas in the second case, it becomes a bit more urgent. So this is a study that was done in UK with 1,200 individuals across Europe and US. And they were asked about their ongoing long-distance relationships or their past long-distance relationships. And they were asked about what are the factors that they think support the relationship and what are the factors that they think don't support the relationship. And what they found out was that most long-distance relationships in this study, among these 1,200 individuals, failed because the relationship wasn't going anywhere. Get this, 71% of women and 64% of men identified as a lack of progress in the relationship as the reason to call it quits. So if there's no prospect of the two of you being together in the future, one of you relocating or both of you relocating to a whole new city and being together in the future, it's very likely that your long distance relationship will not work. Now, this is not so surprising, honestly, because it is kind of the case in every relationship, isn't it? You start by casually dating, and if it progresses to a bit more serious relationship, then it progresses. If it doesn't, then you just stop at casually dating, right? If you're in a serious relationship, you want it to evolve into maybe marriage, maybe living in together. Then maybe you want to have kids together. Maybe you don't want to have kids together, but you want to buy a house together. So you always want your relationship to keep evolving. And that becomes harder in a long distance relationship only because how do you build a life together, right? If your lives are in different cities. A long distance relationship, it's always easier to survive when there is a deadline. To summarize, if you want to make a long distance relationship work, you have to work towards the relationship not being a long distance relationship anymore. Now, how do you do that? Rule number one of any kind of an issue or even a non-issue in a relationship. Just rule number one of a healthy relationship is communication. Obviously, you talk about this. You talk about how and when and where the two of you are going to be together again. Which one of you is going to relocate? Is it going to be one of you or both of you? At least one of you has to be okay with relocating. There's just no other way. I mean, yes, there are a ton of relationships that survive for years as long distance relationships, but how long can you really do that, right? You also have to think about it practically. It costs a ton of money to travel frequently to see your partner. Your relationship will never evolve into something more reliable or concrete. You won't be able to build a life together. You won't be able to have a home together. You'll be guests, frequent guests at each other's house. You can have a cupboard or a drawer at each other's house, but you won't have a home together. There are a ton of practical issues in a long distance relationship which are eventually going to catch up on you, and you won't be able to sustain it. What helps you sustain it is the hope that at some point in the future you won't have to travel frequently. Number 2, visit each other frequently. And here's another interesting thing about long distance relationships. The greater the distance between you and your partner, the more satisfied you are in a long distance relationship. It might sound ironic, but hear me out. What happens is that when you know that you can't frequently see each other, it's not like a 2, 3, 4 hour drive away. It's not a quick weekend trip that you can take. You learn to be okay with not seeing each other frequently. Whereas if you have a partner who is living in a city that's a weekend trip away from you, whether that's a flight or a road trip, if they're not seeing you or you're not seeing them every weekend or every other weekend, at some point you're going to start questioning why. But regardless of the distance, try to see each other as often as you can. That will help you get to know each other better, just help you be more comfortable with each other with every visit, and it'll make you feel less lonely. Number 3. According to Ben Michaelis, who is a psychologist, you have to prioritize your long distance relationship over your local social commitments. I don't know if I fully agree with this. I don't think I do, but I would still like to talk about it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. So do tell me in the comments below what you think about this. Should you prioritize your long distance relationship over your local social commitments? Or should it be the other way around? Or should it be somewhere in the middle? So number 1, if you're prioritizing your long distance relationship over your local social commitments, you are never missing any calls. You are going out of your way, skipping your social commitments back home to make sure that you talk to your partner. Sometimes it can cost you real physical socialization. So for example, you've been invited to a birthday party and it also happens to be your partner's birthday who is miles away from you, but you want to celebrate your partner's birthday with them over a Zoom call, because now we can do that, and you end up skipping a birthday party of a close friend or even an acquaintance where you could have had the opportunity to physically spend time with other people, network, possibly strengthen your social support system where you are. Sometimes say you're just out chilling with a friend and you have to cut it short because you have a video call scheduled with your partner. What do you do in that situation? If you're prioritizing your long distance relationship, then you're gonna cut short your session with your friend, and then you're gonna go home and you'll get on a video call with your partner. It's a choice. Everything is a personal choice, and it all depends on what your relationship needs. According to Ben Michaelis, this is the way to do it, because if you prioritize it, if you tell yourself that this relationship is more important than your local social commitments, then you will feel less resentful of putting in the kind of effort that your relationship needs. Option number 2 is to prioritize your local social relationships over your long distance relationship. So this would mean that you don't skip your friend's birthday to celebrate birthday over Zoom with your partner, and you celebrate your birthday with them over a Zoom call the next day or the day before. This would also give them the freedom to celebrate their birthday with whoever they want to celebrate it with, maybe their friends or whatever their network is where they are. And you then get the opportunity to spend time with a ton of people and just go out and socialize. And at the end of the day, we are social creatures, right? We need some social stimulation. Again, it's all a personal choice. If your relationship needs this, if you need this, then you do this. If you don't need this, if you feel like whatever, it's a personal choice. The third would be a balance. In every area of life, And in every aspect of relationships, it's super hard to strike a balance. In this regard, a balanced approach would look something like sometimes you prioritize your partner, sometimes you prioritize your local social circle. Tip number 3 has 3 subparts, and I'll let you figure out which one is the best for you and your relationship and your partner. Now, tip number 4. Try to combine and familiarize yourself with each other's social circles. Let's first talk about what happens in a non-long distance relationship. Even if you have different social circles to begin with, as your relationship evolves and as the two of you start to get more committed to each other, you also tend to start combining your social circles. So if your partner has a really close friend and they are throwing a party or they are just hanging out, at some point in your relationship, you are also going to start hanging out with them, and vice versa. It all kind of starts to come together and you become a part of each other's social circle. This obviously does not happen in a long distance relationship, and sometimes this can create insecurity and jealousy and just needless sense of mystery. This is not the right kind of mystery you need in a relationship. So every time you visit, you want to make the effort of also hanging out with their friends, maybe their family, talk to each other about your friends and who you're hanging out with, what you're doing when you're going out. It just makes you feel a bit more secure in the relationship and also more familiar with each other. Finally, the most practical of all tips, if you want your long distance relationship to work, you have to be able to afford it. And by that, I literally mean afford it, money-wise. Do a budget check. Figure out how much it would cost you to visit your partner or for them to visit you. So this includes your flight tickets or petrol ka kharcha if you're taking road trips, stay or food. That should be accounted for in your monthly budget or your 6-month budget or your year-long budget. So be practical about it, because if you don't think about it, and then you will either end up spending a lot of money and then 6 months in, 1 year in, you're like, dude, like I'm broke, what the fuck? Or you're going to keep spending a lot of money and then slowly just start growing resentful about it. So keep your budget in mind. It's important. So let me sum it up for you. If you want your long distance relationship to work, you have to work towards a future where the two of you will be together and your relationship will no longer be a long distance relationship. And how you do that is, number 1, talk about it. Number 2, visit each other frequently. Number 3, either prioritize your long distance relationship or prioritize your local social circle, or find a balance, whichever one of these 3 works best for you and your relationship at the moment. And you can always shuffle, right? You may have phases where you feel like you need to prioritize your partner right now, and you may have phases where you feel like no, like you have real people around you. Okay, so be flexible here. Number 4, get to know each other's social circle. And number 5, be realistic about money. Alright guys, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Do leave comments below, tell me what you think, and also if you have a relationship question that I can help find the answer to, let me know. Last and not the least, don't forget to subscribe. Keep zen.